All right, guys, here we are back to this. Hopefully there won't be another tornado today or anything of that nature. Today we're going to look at the Enlightenment for about 35-40 minutes here, and then you guys are going to work on a little compare and contrast project. We finished absolutism and the transatlantic economy, and we're moving now into the period of revolutions. So the American Revolution will kickstart revolutions around the world that will boomerang from America to France, down to Haiti, into South America, and back up into Mexico. So revolutions across the world. And the Enlightenment, getting enlightened, is about learning. Hopefully many of you, even you, Harrison, can get enlightened, or maybe Ryan, whoever, depending on what period we are in. And the political ideas of the Enlightenment will stem directly from the scientific revolution. We talked about it earlier, coming out of the Renaissance, the idea of humanism. The ideas of men like, Copernicus and Galileo will bring about a new way of looking at the physical world. And so if reason can be used to govern the natural world, then it's only logical that reason can be applied to the understanding of natural laws. Natural laws are the simple things that govern the actions of human nature, the basics of human nature. Going back to Socrates, know thyself. And for that reason, it stands that if natural laws can be applied to society, they could solve all of the social, the economic, and political turmoil of the day at the end of absolutism. When you have those strong monarchs, but their building projects and their wars are causing bankruptcy and things to be hard on their populations. The two biggest guys to talk about, or two of the guys to talk about, are Thomas Hobbes and John Locke. And the thing that they differ in, known as the social contract. The social contract is just simply, what is the role of government? What should governments do? Now, both guys will live during the Stuart dynasty of England. That is, James I, Charles I, II, James II, the guy that got his head cut off, all right, ending with the Glorious Revolution. And Hobbes and Locke lived not only during this time, but through the English Civil War. And as a result, they have two drastically different views on what the social contract is. John Locke is a philosopher who feels that people are basically good and moral. According to Locke, people were entitled to basic natural rights, things that everyone has to enjoy from the time they were born onward. I call John Locke the guy who wants to unlock the freedoms that everyone is supposed to enjoy. Locke's beliefs are that everyone had the right to life, to liberty, and property. And you can see that he will be heavily influential in the American Revolution, because those are some of the exact things that Thomas Jefferson puts in the famous Declaration of Independence, one of the best documents in human history. Locke also believed that governments, the duty of government, should be created specifically to protect these natural rights, to protect everyone's right to life, to liberty, and to property. Locke also believed that governments should have limited power, not absolute, but limited power, not like the absolute monarchs of his day. According to Locke, the obligation of government is to its citizens. The job of a government is to look after and take care of its own citizenry. If a government should fail to live up to its obligations, or did not respect a person's basic rights, then it was the people's duty or right to overthrow the government, create a new one. If they're not looking out for you, erase them, get rid of them, and then take over. Now, he will be countered by a fellow Englishman named Thomas Hobbes. I think I got these backwards. So here is Locke, all right, opposite view. And when you talk about having the right to overthrow the government, what happens first? The American Revolution will apply those Enlightenment thoughts against the British government. Now, Thomas Hobbes, on the other hand, where John Locke unlocks the freedom, Thomas Hobbes wants to hog all of the power. Right? Thomas Hobbes has this dark view of human nature, and he writes a book called Leviathan. And in it, Hobbes says that everyone is basically greedy and selfish. And therefore, they needed the government to control them. According to Hobbes, people need to be told what to do. People exist in what he calls a state of nature. In this state, people were uncontrollable. And life, as he famously will put, is nasty, brutish, in short. You're like wild animals. Therefore, what must be created is a social contract between the people and the government. The people must willingly give up this state of nature. They must give up their basic rights to create an organized society where there are rules and where there are laws. The best way to create this society was to have a powerful, absolute government to tell you what to do. This is what you must do. It is necessary and good for society to exist this way. So while Locke wants to unlock the freedom, Hobbes wants to hog all the power. In his mind, absolutism is the only way to go. Following those two, we get a guy from France, the Baron de Montesquieu. All right. Now, Montesquieu is even mentioned in National Treasure. He has a quote put on the Statue of Liberty. And over in France in the 1700s, Montesquieu will look at all forms of government. He will study them from ancient types of government all the way up through his modern times. And much like John Locke, Montesquieu did not like the idea of an absolute monarchy. He says that just isn't going to work. And he writes a brilliant essay titled The Spirit of the Laws. And Montesquieu will give credit to the British Parliament for their idea of limited government, from holding the king accountable. He liked how the British implemented it, and what he considered to be, Montesquieu is the father of the three branches of government. What most of you are studying in civics and economics with Mr. North and Ms. Rajan and Mr. Rober and others. The executive, the legislative, and the judicial branches. To Montesquieu, the only way to preserve liberty was to have a separation of powers. You must separate what it is you are trying to do. It's the best way to maintain logical liberty. The first place that we see it enacted will be in the United States. Today, we call it the checks and balance system. No one has total and complete power. No branch can be that much more dominant over the others. Building on what Montesquieu says is a guy named François-Marie Arouet, better known as Voltaire. That was his pen name. I also like Voltaire. It sounds kind of, cool, like a Power Ranger. Voltaire, or a good name for a dog or something. Anyway, Voltaire will famously say several times that he lived to say what he thought. He was one of those people, if they had a thought, it was coming out. No internal monologue. And as a result, he becomes a very controversial, somewhat polarizing figure during his day. So in France, because the times were so volatile, he is sitting in the Parisian cafes. These guys are sitting around drinking wine, coffee, sometimes doped up, philosophizing. But Voltaire will use a clever combination of comedy and fiction to express his opinions. His pseudonym, like You know, Benjamin Franklin was Silence Dogood, and Sir Thomas More writes Utopia, so they wouldn't get in trouble. They used different names. And he writes a famous book called Candide. And in Candide, Voltaire specifically denounced governmental corruption. He says, look, we know what's going on. All right, you guys have to stop it. The thing that he hated the most was the practice of the Atlantic slave trade. He also didn't like religious exclusivism. Remember, Louis XIV revoked the Edict of Nantes. So everybody now has to be Catholic. And his ideas make the Roman Catholic Church angry. Here they're beginning to reassert their power, and here's this guy saying no. He also angers French government officials as well because they were broke. They had lost those wars. They had not the dynamism, I don't even know if that's the word, that Louis XIV maintained. So Voltaire will be exiled. He will have many of his books burnt. Well, good old Fahrenheit 451. But he doesn't stop. He just keeps going. And he believed in free speech, something that we say a lot, but I don't know if many of us believe in. All right? His famous quote is, I do not agree with what you are saying, but I will defend to my death your right to say it. Now, we like to say we have free speech in the United States, but we like free speech only if it agrees with us. We don't understand that if you can be for something, I can be against it. And that's what Voltaire was saying. He was punished. It didn't matter to him. He said, I do not agree with what you are saying, but I will defend to my death your right to say it. The basic right of free speech, which is very, very difficult to understand and work with sometimes. Following Voltaire and Montesquieu, we get a guy here. Here we have, these old Ebenezer Scrooge looking guys. This is clearly Thomas Hobbes. Here is John Locke, Montesquieu, and Voltaire, who's kind of the younger, handsomest part of the group. Now we move to a guy named Denis Diderot. And Diderot publishes something that we don't use very much anymore. He published a set of 28 encyclopedias. Now, in these encyclopedias, he will print the works of all the political philosophers, everything going on at the time, from things like Voltaire, Montesquieu, Locke, Hobbes. He put it all in there. And what Diderot said, his goal was to change the way that people thought about government. I'm going to lay it all out for you, and I want you all to be able to make your own choice. Now, the problem for Diderot and for the French government was that it challenged the belief of divine right, of the absolute monarchy, that God chose you of all people to be king, therefore you are king. The government will accuse Diderot of eroding the moral fabric of the people of France. The Pope will threaten to excommunicate him and use the heavy ammo from the papacy. And they said that they would excommunicate anybody who was caught reading those encyclopedias. However, because of the printing press, it was difficult to stop people from reading them. Over 20,000 were printed. It was very difficult to police what 20,000 people are doing. So people begin to read the ideas of the Enlightenment, but also across the sea in the colonies, or America as well, who's going to put them all into motion. Next guy is a name we like to say, JeanJacques Rousseau. Rousseau. All right, Inspector Clouseau, JeanJacques Rousseau, whomever. Rousseau is very similar to a good old John Locke. And he believed that people were basically good. However, this is being destroyed or constantly corrupted by vices in society. People will be corrupted by what society is like. So in 1762, Rousseau will come up with his own ideas on the social contract. And he says that all men are born free. And it is society that will constantly change people from good to bad. Look at the modern day, all right? Kanye West is super rich, but now he's $53 million in debt. Look at reality TV. People are famous for what reason? Why are the Kardashians famous? But people love them. People watch the E! Network and, People magazine and fads and fashions. They try to emulate who they think are good people. Well, who is to say they are good people? Why are we following them? All right, Rousseau saying, think for yourself. Like, why would you want to emulate a bunch of skanky, smutty people who post videos of themselves to make famous? Why is that something you want to emulate? So, there. I just went Rousseau on you guys. So, society corrupts them. Controls the way people are shaped. Think of the commercials and social media and things that you are blitzed with all the time. They change and shape your behavior. Look at the Super Bowl, all right? All those commercials, all right? Those are honed in to influence you to buy that product, basic marketing. And so to Rousseau, some social controls are necessary. Some things have to be set down. A consenting form of government, that, and this is very important, that the people choose is necessary for the common good. What is best for the most people? It would be great if it was all people, but sometimes you got to do what's best for everyone, like voting. However, the difficult thing about democracy is sometimes your candidate or your side wins and sometimes it loses, but that's how it works. People vote. It's the will of the majority. So, if people don't do this for the common good, then people would have to surrender their rights, their basic rights. So when governed in a system that is based on their consent, people will retain their basic freedoms, because government is chosen based on the will of the majority. This is what most people want. Common good should win. So unlike Locke, this is where they differ, Rousseau felt that one should aim for the good of the entire community rather than the will of the single individual. We are all important as a whole, all right? Now, we live in a world that you guys are becoming very narcissistic. It's all about you, it's all about you, it's all about you. People have their face buried in cell phones because they don't want to interact with human beings around them. Are we losing that ability to articulate ourselves and speak to each other? Nobody talks on the phone anymore. It's all this. Rousseau says, no, we've got to worry about everybody holistically, not just individually. So I've been talking about a lot of guys. I've been using the word man a lot. Well, there's also some natural rights for women going to be talked about as well. It's, a lot of people felt that these free and equal laws only applied to men. Women, you don't have natural rights. What's your job? All right? Why do you need any rights? And so if you do have rights, they must be much more limited in scope than they will be for guys. However, in the 1750s, okay, we're getting past the old Rangers PowerPoint. The 1750s, a small number of women will begin to argue against this idea. And the most famous is a lady, and I love her name, Mary Wollstonecraft. She just sounds tough and like gritty. Wollstonecraft. Not Minecraft, Wollstonecraft. So easy there. Video gamers. And she was from England. She will claim that women had been left out of the social contract. How can that be? She said a woman, number one, top priority, should be a good mother to her children. All right, that's what we should try and be. However, a woman should also be able to think for herself and not be completely and solely dependent upon her husband. All right? My mother-in-law drives me crazy. You ask her who to vote for, and she'll say, like, well, whoever Jim votes for. I'm like, no, think for yourself. Make your own decision. All right? Husband, I'm dependent on him as the breadwinner, so I'll do what he says. No, that's not the way it should be. And so she will write something known as the Vindication of the Rights of a Woman, in which she claims that both boys and girls, men and women, should be given the same education, because it is education that is a path to free thought. And with free thought, you get freedom and you get independence, two hallmarks here of American society. So we're going to move away from political thought, and we're going to move into something that Colin is going to dearly love, and that is new forms of economic thought. The number one thing that we're going to think about there is something known as laissez-faire. No, that's not a name of a famous dog or TV show in the 1950s. Laissez-faire is an interesting idea. As scientific thought gave rise to the idea of a person's natural and political rights, and which is the best form of government, economic thought, new forms of economic thought are also going to be created. And the newest one is the idea of laissez-faire. And that simply means that business and economic enterprise should be allowed to operate without any governmental controls whatsoever. No governmental interference. This idea is completely opposite the ideas of mercantilism, where colonies and economies exist solely for the good of the mother country, very tightly and very rigidly controlled. This is what most of the European economies were based on at the time. Under mercantilism, think of the word merchant in there. European countries measured their wealth against each other by how much gold and silver they had. Silver and gold, whatever. What is it? AU and AG on the periodic table, according to Dr. Wong? Something like that. Anyway, however, new economic philosophers of the Enlightenment said that the new wealth was going to come from different sources other than gold and silver. Enlightenment philosophers said that people should make land. Again, we're still an agricultural society. Land should be made productive as possible by farming, growing cash crops, logging. You look at the destruction of the Brazilian rainforest, and you can trace how the difference in rainfall in Central Africa and in India and in Asia and in California, that this moisture bubble, it's too long to explain, that used to go up in the atmosphere and then be carried across the jet stream and trade winds is gone, because for whatever reason we think cutting down the lungs of the earth is a good idea. But don't get me started. Anyway, when it comes to farming and logging and things of that nature, there should be free trade, not restricted to the isolation mentality of the mother country, of mercantilism. Colonies can only trade with their mother country and not with each other. That stifles economic enterprise. Enlightenment economic philosophers wanted to open up the colonies and share resources in order to make money. And this brings us to my favorite economic philosopher. Easy back there, Colin, and all you guys around here eating your kale and, you know, wearing biodegradable sandals or other stuff you guys do. 1776, Thomas Jefferson writes the Declaration of Independence, and Adam Smith writes a book called The Wealth of Nations. And in it, Adam Smith is going to describe what he calls a free market system. And in a free market, the national economy is going to be determined by the forces of supply and demand. Supply and demand will naturally regulate business activity. all right? The greater the demand, the more the supply, all right? But if there is a high demand, companies can charge a pretty penny because everybody wants it. And if you look at and find the sweet spot where supply meets demand, everyone is going to be made happy. Workers will have jobs, people will get the products they want, they can afford the products they want, and the business owner will still make money. It is a constantly fluctuating activity. According to Smith, in business, everything is tied together. From the manufacturing of the product, to the amount of money, the salary that an employee is going to be paid, to the profit that an owner is going to make. All are part of the intricate supply and demand process. If there's a demand for a product, all right, then companies are going to find a way to meet that demand. This will make the economy better, and the government isn't going to tinker. The government is going to interfere. We're going to let go. Hands off, no controls. To Smith, the government's job was to focus on ensuring good government to the people, not regulating business, but focus on the people. As the Industrial Revolution is going to grow and spread, Smith's idea will shape the world up and through the modern 20th century. And so with that, we have these Enlightenment's ideas beginning to be diffused and spread, like moisture in the trade winds or the jet stream. And all across Europe, people begin to sit and discuss these new ideas, political ideas, social ideas, economic ideas, what is best. And what we find is the old monarchical ways, the old ways of doing things going back to Charlemagne are beginning to erode. We are seeking the best possible economic system and well-being for ourselves. In Voltaire's Candide, a traveler is going to wander, kind of like Plato was wandering looking for the best government possible back in ancient Greece. Candide, a traveler, goes looking for the best possible society. Where is it? Can we find it? And while people were discussing these different types of national governments, the Roman Catholic Church is trying to maintain a solid grip on power. The more people are engaged in questioning, in thought, the less power the establishment at the time has. Now, across the Atlantic Ocean, over in the United States, people were beginning to take the different pieces and parts of the Enlightenment philosophies and bring them together like a puzzle. Social here, economic here, religious up here, political up here. And they liked the ideas put forth by Locke and Montesquieu and Voltaire and Rousseau and Adam Smith. And they're going to combine them. Thomas Jefferson will take it along with a couple other assistants and mold it into the Declaration of Independence, hailed as one of the greatest documents in Western history. And then they will reappear again later in the United States Constitution. Some ideas taken from the English Bill of Rights and ideas of that nature. And these ideas of the Enlightenment are going to spark revolutions not only in the United States, but it's, as I said, boomerang over to Europe, where we're going to have just a hot mess of a revolution over there. It'll rebound into the Caribbean with Haiti and influence Simon Bolivar and Jose de San Martin in South America, and Father Miguel Hidalgo and Jose Pavon up in Mexico. So that's the next unit we are going to look at. Right now, you guys are going to use this compare and contrast chart. Maybe we'll do that at the beginning. Use it any way you want. Basically, I want you to look at the similarities and differences between your two absolute monarchs and do a pre-write. Think of three basic headings for your theses, like how the absolute monarchs came to power. Maybe it's how they controlled their nobles, or maybe it's their legacy, or whatever their mistakes are. Look for those similarities and differences, do a brain dump, and then form a good thesis, and then under those examples that you have, put a little bit of elaboration and explanation. When I see you again next week, we are going to turn that into an essay. All right, so you should have maybe 10 or 15 minutes to do that. Sorry I missed you guys today, but I will see you Monday. So, Melega out. Talk to you guys soon.